When panic erupted in the shopping mall, everyone ran. But he walked calmly, never rushed, never panicked. If only they had known what that scar on his neck meant, no one would have been surprised. Welcome to Warriors. Before we dive into this powerful tale of hidden courage and silent strength, tell me in the comments, where are you watching from today? And if you've ever encountered someone who seemed ordinary until a single moment revealed their extraordinary past, hit that subscribe button. These stories need to be told. If you or someone around you has lived through similar experiences, share those stories in the comments and support the channel by subscribing so we can continue sharing these inspiring tales. The Westfield Shopping Center opened its doors every morning at 9 a.m. sharp, and Marcus was always there 15 minutes early, not because he was eager, not because management required it, but because old habits don't die, they just find new uniforms. He wore the standard security guard outfit, navy blue shirt, black pants, and a radio that rarely crackled with anything more urgent than cleanup needed in aisle 7. His badge read simply M. Carter. No first name, no title, no indication of the man beneath the polyester. Marcus was in his late 50s, with graying hair kept short and neat. He walked with purpose, but never hurried, his eyes constantly scanning the crowds with a precision that most people mistook for boredom. What they didn't notice was the way he positioned himself near exits, how he mapped every entrance and blind spot, or how his hand occasionally drifted to his neck, touching a scar that most people were too polite to ask about. The scar ran from just below his left ear down to his collarbone, a jagged line that spoke of violence, survival, and stories that would never be told in a mall food court. For 3 years, Marcus had worked the day shift at Westfield. He knew every store manager by name, could spot a shoplifter from 50 yards, and had never once raised his voice or made a scene. When teenagers got too rowdy near the fountain, he simply appeared beside them with a quiet, "Gentlemen, let's keep it moving." When elderly customers needed directions, he escorted them personally, walking at their pace, making small talk about the weather. The other security guards, younger men who talked loudly about their weekend plans and complained about their shifts, found Marcus strange. He never joined their conversations, never shared stories about difficult customers, never seemed to need backup even when dealing with the mall's more challenging visitors. "Guy's like a robot," one of them had said during a break. "Never shows any emotion, never gets rattled. It's weird." What they didn't understand was that Marcus had learned long ago that showing emotion could get you killed, and getting rattled was a luxury he'd trained himself out of in places where the stakes were life and death. It was a Tuesday afternoon in November when everything changed. The mall was moderately busy, mothers with strollers, elderly couples window shopping, a few teenagers cutting school. Marcus was making his usual rounds when he noticed something that made him pause. A man in a dark jacket was moving through the crowd in a pattern that didn't match the casual flow of shoppers. He wasn't looking at stores, wasn't stopping to browse. His eyes were mapping exits, counting security cameras, noting blind spots. His jacket hung loose, and he kept one hand near his right side in a way that sent alarm bells through Marcus's trained instincts. Marcus activated his radio with the subtle click that he'd mastered years ago. "Central, this is Carter. Code yellow, West Corridor. Single male, dark jacket, displaying concerning behavior patterns." "Copy that, Carter. Do you need backup?" "Negative. Maintaining observation." What Marcus didn't say into the radio was that his heart rate hadn't increased, his breathing hadn't changed, and his hands were steady. Because this wasn't new. This feeling, the weight of potential violence in the air, was something he'd carried in much more dangerous places. At 2:47 p.m., the man in the dark jacket reached into his coat and pulled out what looked like a weapon. Panic erupted instantly. Shoppers screamed, parents grabbed their children, employees ducked behind counters. The peaceful Tuesday afternoon transformed into chaos in seconds. Everyone ran, mothers clutching babies, elderly couples moving as fast as their legs could carry them, teenagers sprinting toward the nearest exits. The sound of fear filled the air, screaming, crying, the thunder of hundreds of feet running on tile floors. But Marcus walked, not slowly, not hesitantly, but with the calculated pace of someone who understood that panic was the real enemy. He moved through the fleeing crowd like a man walking upstream in a river, his eyes locked on the threat, his mind automatically calculating angles, distances, and tactical options. The muscle memory kicked in without conscious thought. His breathing remained controlled, his hands steady. This wasn't the first time he'd walked toward danger while others fled. In Helmand Province, he'd done this same walk across open desert, knowing snipers were watching, knowing each step could be his last. But someone had to take point. Someone had to be the one who moved forward when everyone else needed cover. That's when Sarah Mitchell, a young mother who had worked at the jewelry store for 6 months, saw him clearly for the first time. While she pressed herself against a pillar, her infant son crying in her arms, she watched this quiet security guard advance toward danger with a composure that seemed impossible. And that's when she noticed the scar on his neck, really noticed it. The way it caught the fluorescent lights, the way it seemed to tell a story of violence survived and strength earned. It wasn't just a mark. It was a road map of a life lived in service to others, a reminder of days when walking toward danger was his job, his duty, his calling. As Marcus moved closer, his mind shifted into a mode that had been dormant for 3 years, but never truly gone. He noted the positioning of civilians, the location of potential cover, the angles of approach. His eyes cataloged every detail, the man's stance, the way he held the weapon, the tremor in his hands that suggested fear rather than trained intent. This wasn't a hardened combatant. This was someone in crisis, someone who needed de-escalation rather than force. Marcus had dealt with both types before. In the mountains of Afghanistan, he'd faced fighters who chose violence, and in the aftermath of battle, he'd talked down fellow Marines who'd been pushed too far by what they'd seen. The jewelry store clerk, pressed against her pillar, watched Marcus approach with a steadiness that seemed to defy human nature. She'd worked retail for 6 years, had seen security guards handle shoplifters and unruly customers. But this was different. This man moved like he owned the space around him, like danger was an old acquaintance he'd met many times before. "Sir," Marcus called out, his voice carrying across the nearly empty corridor. "Let's talk about this." The man with the weapon spun toward him, and for a moment Marcus saw everything he needed to know, the tears, the shaking hands, the way he held the weapon like it was foreign to him. This wasn't malice. This was desperation. "Stay back!" the man shouted. "I don't want to hurt anyone, but I will if I have to." Marcus stopped walking, but didn't retreat. "I believe you don't want to hurt anyone. That tells me you're a good man having a bad day. I've had those days, too." What happened next separated Marcus from every other security guard in the city. Instead of following protocol, calling for backup, establishing a perimeter, waiting for police, he did what his training in another life had taught him. He treated this as a human being, in crisis, not a tactical problem to be solved. "What's your name?" Marcus asked, his voice calm and conversational. The man blinked. clearly not expecting the question. David. David Morrison. David, I'm Marcus. I work here. Keep people safe. That's my job. And right now, that includes keeping you safe, too. David's grip on the weapon loosened slightly. Nobody wants to keep me safe. I lost my job last month. My wife filed for divorce, and they're taking my kids away. Nobody cares what happens to me. Marcus took one careful step forward. I care, David. That's why I'm here, instead of running like everyone else. Behind her pillar, Sarah Mitchell realized she was witnessing something extraordinary. This wasn't just crisis management. This was one human being reaching out to another across a gulf of desperation and fear. And she understood suddenly that the quiet man she'd walked past every day for 6 months was someone who had spent years learning how to do exactly this. You were military, weren't you? David asked suddenly, and Marcus felt something shift in the air. Marine Corps, 2 tours in Afghanistan, 1 in Iraq. Army, did 1 tour in Afghanistan before? David's voice broke. Before everything went wrong. And there it was, the connection that Marcus had sensed but couldn't name. David wasn't just a man in crisis. He was a brother in arms who'd come home to find that the battles didn't end when the war did. Marcus stepped closer, and now David could see the scar on his neck clearly. Helmand? David asked. IED, convoy escort mission gone wrong. Lost 2 good men that day. Marcus's voice carried the weight of memory. What about you? Kandahar. Rocket attack on our FOB. I made it out, but... David touched his own chest where Sarah could now see the outline of scars beneath his shirt. Sometimes I wonder if I really did. Marcus nodded, with understanding that went deeper than words. The war doesn't end when you come home, does it? Nobody understands that. They want you to just be normal again. Get a job, pay bills, pretend like none of it happened. David, I'm going to tell you something, and I need you to hear me. Marcus was close enough now that he could reach out and touch the weapon, but he kept his hands visible and non-threatening. I came home with nightmares, with anger, with a head full of things I couldn't share with anyone who hadn't been there. I thought about eating my gun more than once. David's eyes widened. How did you... I found people who understood, other Marines, other vets who'd walked the same path, and I found purpose again, different purpose, but purpose all the same. Marcus gestured around them. This isn't Afghanistan, but people still need protecting. Kids still need someone to stand between them and danger. It's not the same mission, but it's still a mission. Sarah, still clutching her baby, felt tears streaming down her face as she listened to this conversation. She was witnessing something sacred, 2 warriors recognizing each other across the aftermath of service, one pulling the other back from the edge. David, whatever brought you here today, whatever seems impossible right now, it's not the end of your story. But if you don't put that weapon down, if you don't let me help you, then your kids lose their father forever. And brother, I've seen enough good men die. I'm not watching another one go down on my watch. The word brother did what no police negotiator's training could have accomplished. David looked into Marcus's eyes and saw not judgment, not fear, but recognition. One veteran looking at another with complete understanding of the weight they both carried. Slowly, carefully, David placed the weapon on the ground and stepped back. Marcus moved forward and secured it, then surprised everyone watching by pulling David into a firm embrace. It's going to be okay, Marcus said quietly. We're going to figure this out together. By the time police and paramedics arrived, they found the situation completely resolved. David was sitting calmly on a bench, Marcus beside him, talking in low voices about VA resources, veteran support groups, and the long road back to finding purpose after war. In the hours that followed, as the mall returned to normal and statements were taken, the story of what had really happened began to spread. Not the official version. Security guard subdues armed individual, but the real story. The story of two veterans finding each other in a moment of crisis, of quiet heroism that had nothing to do with badges or titles. Sarah Mitchell, still shaken but profoundly moved by what she'd witnessed, approached Marcus as he completed his paperwork. "I had no idea," she said simply, "about who you are, what you've done." Marcus looked up from his incident report. "Most people don't need to know. It doesn't change the job that needs doing today. But it changes everything about how you do it." Marcus was quiet for a moment. 3 years ago, when I took this job, people asked me why I wanted to be a mall security guard. They thought I was wasting my training, my experience. They didn't understand that the skills are the same: situational awareness, de-escalation, protection of innocence. The uniform's different, but the mission hasn't changed. The scar on your neck, shrapnel from an IED blast, 2 inches lower, and we wouldn't be having this conversation. He touched it unconsciously. But scars aren't just reminders of what we've survived. They're reminders of why we keep serving. That evening, word spread through the veteran community about what had happened at Westfield Mall. Not through news reports or official channels, but through the informal network that connects those who've served. A Marine Corps Force Recon veteran working mall security had talked down an Army veteran in crisis, using nothing but understanding, respect, and the brotherhood that transcends all other divisions. David Morrison was taken to a hospital for evaluation, but not in handcuffs. He went voluntarily, with Marcus's promise that he wouldn't face this alone. Within a week, Marcus had connected him with veteran services, employment assistance, and a support group of men who understood exactly what he was going through. The toy weapon, because that's all it had been, a realistic replica that David had bought to scare someone, anyone, into paying attention to his pain, was disposed of. But the real weapon that day had been despair, and it had been defused not by force, but by recognition, understanding, and the simple act of one warrior refusing to let another fall. Marcus returned to work the next day, at his usual time, wearing the same uniform, carrying the same radio. But everything was different. The respect in people's eyes, the way conversations quieted when he passed, the understanding that the quiet man who'd walked among them for 3 years was someone who'd seen and done things they could barely imagine. But Marcus handled it the same way he handled everything else, with quiet professionalism and an unwavering focus on the job at hand. Because that's what warriors do. They serve, they protect, they do what needs doing, and they don't need applause or recognition to know their worth. The scar on his neck remained what it had always been, not a badge of honor to be displayed, but a reminder of the price of service and the responsibility that comes with surviving when others don't. So here's what we learned about Marcus Carter, and about all the quiet warriors who walk among us. They don't stop being protectors when they take off the uniform. They find new missions, new people to serve, new ways to stand between danger and innocence. Sometimes they're security guards, sometimes they're teachers, sometimes they're the person behind you in line at the grocery store. But when the moment comes, when panic erupts and everyone else runs, they walk forward because that's what they've always done, and that's who they've always been. Have you ever met someone like Marcus? Someone whose scars told stories they never shared, whose quiet strength only showed itself when it mattered most. Share their story in the comments below, because here at Warriors, we believe that every veteran, every silent guardian, every protector deserves to be seen and honored. Thank you for watching. If this story moved you, subscribe to Warriors and help us continue honoring those who serve, whether they wear uniforms or polo shirts, whether they carry rifles or radios. We'll see you in the next story, and until then, remember, the strongest among us are often the ones who never need to prove it. As Marcus closed the distance to the threat, his training took over completely. He didn't think about the polyester uniform or the mall regulations or the fact that he was technically just a security guard making $12 an hour. He thought about sight lines, cover positions, and the fact that there were innocent people behind him who needed someone to stand between them and harm. The man with a weapon, later determined to be experiencing a mental health crisis and carrying a realistic toy gun, suddenly found himself face to face with someone who wasn't running, wasn't screaming, wasn't showing any fear at all. "Sir," Marcus said quietly, his voice carrying despite the chaos around them, "I need you to set that down and step back." There was something in his tone, not aggression, not pleading, but absolute authority that cut through the man's confusion. For a moment, the two men stood facing each other while the mall emptied around them. "I don't want to hurt anyone," the man said, tears streaming down his face. "I know," Marcus replied, "and we're going to make sure that doesn't happen, but I need you to put that down first." The man looked into Marcus's eyes and saw something that made him believe. Perhaps it was the complete absence of fear, or the way Marcus held himself with the confidence of someone who had faced real danger and survived it. Whatever it was, he slowly placed the toy weapon on the ground and stepped back. Marcus stepped forward, secured the weapon, and gently guided the man to sit on a nearby bench. Within minutes, police and paramedics arrived to find the situation completely under control. The threat neutralized not through violence, but through the quiet authority of a man who knew how to command a crisis. In the hours that followed, as statements were taken and the mall slowly returned to normal, people began to see Marcus differently. Sarah Mitchell, still shaken from the experience, approached him as he completed his incident report. "Thank you," she said simply. "I've never seen anyone that calm under pressure." Marcus looked up from his paperwork and gave her a small nod. "Just doing my job, ma'am." But Sarah wasn't satisfied with that answer. "That scar on your neck," she said carefully. "That's not from a work accident, is it?" For a moment Marcus was quiet. Then he spoke, his voice carrying a weight that she'd never heard from him before. "Afghanistan, Helmand Province. EED blast took out most of our convoy. Piece of shrapnel missed my carotid artery by about 2 millimeters. Sarah felt her breath catch. "You were military?" "Marine Corps. Force Recon. 2 tours in Afghanistan. 1 in Iraq." He paused, then added quietly, "Most people don't need to know that. It doesn't matter what you used to be. What matters is what you do when it counts." That evening, word spread through the mall staff about what had really happened and who Marcus really was. Not because he told anyone, he went home that night just as quietly as he always did, but because Sarah and others who had witnessed his actions began to piece together the truth about the man they'd worked beside for 3 years without really seeing. The next morning, Marcus arrived at his usual time to find something different. Instead of the typical scattered greetings and casual nods, he was met with a respect that felt almost uncomfortable. Store managers who had never bothered to learn his first name now stopped to shake his hand. The young security guards, who had once dismissed him as strange, now watched him with something approaching awe. But Marcus handled it the same way he handled everything else, quietly, without fanfare, and with a professionalism that spoke to years of discipline. Just another day at work, he told the mall manager, who wanted to recommend him for a commendation. No different than any other. But it was different, and everyone knew it. Because sometimes it takes a crisis to reveal who people really are, and sometimes the most extraordinary among us are hiding in plain sight, wearing ordinary uniforms and doing extraordinary things when no one's looking. Marcus Carter continued working at Westfield Shopping Center, but the quiet respect that followed him now told a different story. The scar on his neck was no longer just a mark from his past. It was a reminder that warriors don't always wear uniforms, and heroes don't always announce themselves. They simply show up, do what needs to be done, and walk away as quietly as they came. So tell me, have you ever met someone who seemed ordinary until a moment of crisis revealed their true character? Someone whose scars told stories they never shared? Share their story in the comments below, because here at Warriors we believe that every veteran, every hero, every quiet guardian deserves to be remembered. Thank you for watching. If this story moved you, subscribe to Warriors and help us honor those who serve silently. We'll see you in the next story, and until then, remember, sometimes the strongest among us are the ones who never need to prove it.